This episode of The Edge is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet, and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek.fm at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international program of the nonprofit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
You're listening to Trek FM.
What have you done out there on the edge of Federation space?
Welcome to The Edge, Trek FM's dedicated Star Trek Discovery podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Devlin, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host, Amy Nelson. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Patrick. It is so awesome to be podcasting with you. First time. You're the expert. I'm very excited.
Oh boy, we're in trouble. And today we have a special guest, Ken Tripp. Ken, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. When you said hostess, I thought you meant me, so that's cool.
Oh boy, off the rails already.
Hey, why not? We got to have fun with this, right?
Yes, absolutely. So today we're going to do an episode similar to our last one, which was about Vulcan Tyler, but this time we're going to do it about Lorca. So what are your initial thoughts on the character himself, Amy?
Well, Captain Gabriel Lorca. We get to meet him episode 3 of the first season, obviously. And boy, I just fell in love with him. He was so different, but so effective. I thought he really knew his stuff. I was questioning how he played off the other characters because he was so strong and his leadership style is so completely different than we've seen with any of the other previous captains. So there was a bit adjustment that I had to make, but I found myself really enjoying Lorca as a captain.
Awesome. And Ken, what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, same with Amy. I was a big Lorca fan. I was excited to see this new dynamic entering Star Trek and the whole approach they were taking with his character. I thought he had a strong command presence right from the very beginning. He was definitely different, and he definitely had an approach that was very authoritarian and all of that. But when you're talking about at a time of war, my initial reaction was, this is the kind of captain you need.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, actually. I know a lot of people had said originally this wasn't a Federation captain, but this wasn't a Federation time that we've seen before anyway. So other than, in DS9, we did see a war, but it was a little different than this one because this was really for the sake of the Federation. We saw it from the Federation side. So, and we saw a captain actually in the field, not one on a base. But so I really enjoyed it. And even before the reveal that, he was from the Mirror Universe, it still made sense to me that he would act the way he was acting during a war. So what did you think of his leadership, more specifically, the way he led his ship that was so much different from all the other captains? Well,
his leadership style, like I said, was so vastly different, obviously from Picard, because we all know I love TNG. So I will contrast him mostly with Picard. He seemed to have a very clear mission that he had to accomplish. And I think through those first few episodes, we were wondering, what is this mission? Because he kept using this as winning the war. I've got to win the war. We've got to win the war. And he kept saying that over and over and over again. I'm like, why are you reminding us that we have to win the war? So it almost played as I was getting suspicious. What is your really true intent here? Which we come to find out was to get back to the Mirror Universe. I think it made me wonder, and maybe you guys can answer more, he did not share his decisions with hardly anyone. And it was up to you to follow, period. And do you see that as realistic? I have a brother who's served on the Navy and on the USS Carl Vinson, and he's like, yeah, Star Trek, and he's brought me into Star Trek sort of, and he's always like, well, when you're in the lower decks, if you will, you don't know any decision that's being made. And all of a sudden, oh, we're running this drill. Oh, this is for real. Oh, why are we turning? Because you don't know anything. And he's like, it's just up to you to follow decisions. But it was just weird to see that in Discovery at the higher on the bridge. Is that realistic to not share command choices?
Well, I went through recruitment officer training corps in college, and so we would be more like the bridge crew than say your lower decks members. And yes, during wartime, that's just how it is. You just listen to the guy above you. During peacetime, like during TNG's era, you would have more discussion before doing things. But in a war, if the admiral tells the captain, he just tells the first in command, second in command, and down the ranks it goes. And next thing you know, you're flying off to battle and no one knows why, other than you were told to do it. And if you don't react that way, that's when you have problems in war, because when people don't listen, that's when they're going in different directions. Mm-hmm. So this was completely realistic to me. In fact, more realistic than what we do see in the TNG era and in the TOS era and stuff like that. Because even though they are at peacetime, they're a little more conversational than say the soldiers than the upper ranks would be normally anyway. But it makes for good TV. I mean, it would be terrible TV to just have one guy saying, go here. So it has to be that way. Mm-hmm. If there's not a war, in this case, there is a war. So it makes more sense to do it the way they did it.
Ken?
Yeah, a couple of things. Going back to, asking about style and all that other things, it's been a matter of history that even U.S. history, that when we've gone to war many times, we weren't ready for it. And it kind of paralleled what we saw in the first couple of episodes with Discovery, because when everything hit the fan, especially that one officer on Discovery who was like, we're supposed to be explorers. He's all messed up. He couldn't handle it. His head wasn't in the game. And, you need to have that confident, person that is driving people to start to think differently, using terms like, come on, soldier, get up, soldier. We have a war to win, keeping everybody focused, because how it was 2 days ago is no longer how it's going to be in the near future, right? You have to think differently. And it's a very different thing from exploration to going to war. And he seemed to be the right character to drive it in that direction. I will say, having served in a couple of deployments and being in the middle of craziness, it's a balance. You get a warning order that comes down from higher command. Usually you'll get the command staff together to put together an op plan and how you're going to achieve the mission. And then you're going to drive the mission. Once you're out on the mission is when really it becomes, you can have counsel and you can talk through things, but usually the senior person is really leading the show. What I found very interesting about this is, Lorca was running very independent ops. He was doing what he wanted, even when he was told to do other things. That is where he kind of differed from like true military discipline, right? You just don't get to do what you want to do. And he was being called on it in a couple of episodes, right? And that's where you could kind of see, all right, not only was this guy, into it and ready to take the lead, take ownership. We didn't realize, of course, either that there was an ulterior motive that was brewing in this. But at the same time, he did not hesitate. If there was something to be done where it involved a battle, we're going. We need to go. You need us in the fight. No, we need Discovery back here because we need you to focus on that. No, we're the most secret, we're the most powerful weapon. They're getting onto you. No, we need to go. He was just so forward thinking wrong term, forward thinking. He was more directive thinking and wanting to drive to win more than any other captain. He was obsessed with it. And, like I said, because, he grew up obviously in a parallel universe where all he did was fight. So he, I guess in his mind, knew a lot more than these quote unquote mixed military explorers trying to find their way. In his mind, he knew exactly how to bring the fight to the enemy.
Well, not only that, he was also trying to gather data on the jumps to get himself back to Mirror Universe, which these fights allowed him to do.
Right.
Little by little, every jump gave him another piece of the puzzle. So that's why I felt, when that all came about, that's why I felt he did a lot of that. But you're right. You'd be court-martialed. You wouldn't be able, you would no longer have the ship if you didn't listen and take it back. But again, that's a device used because it makes it more interesting. He's being told to come back, but he jumps back to Pavo. Like those kind of things are better for TV than maybe reality.
Well, how do you think with his leadership style? Because I think about how I think a leader should energize and get the troops going and, bring out the best in the people that you are serving with. And sometimes he just didn't do it. And I thought, man, you could get so much more out of your crew. Well, I don't know. Maybe that's just my opinion, that like when they were doing the battle and Lorca's like, well, you couldn't do any worse, So
You mean the drills?
I was like, yeah. I was like, man, why don't you, compliment what they did do right and then say, well, we can do this better, and try and rally the troops in a positive manner. He many times was very negative, it seemed. And how do you feel about that? Leadership decisions. Do you work better when someone's like, you could have done so much better and this is what you did wrong and we're going to do it my way, so jump to it?
All right. So I advise no one to do things the way I do them, because if you do that to me, I sit down and do nothing. But if like, I'm the worst at that, because if you're constantly berating me, and I've had tons of foremen who think the best way to get someone to work harder is to make them think they've done nothing so far, and I'll just sit down and start playing with my phone, because if I'm going to get yelled at either way, I'm just going to get yelled at. But that doesn't work in the military. I mean, if you're told to do something, you do it. If you're yelled at, you continue to do it, or people die. And maybe he could have gotten, part of the problem is too, you have to know, like I've run big jobs and stuff. I never did the deployment, so I can't talk, militarily speaking, but part of it is knowing who you have with you and under you and who responds well to what. Some people do respond better to that. And some people respond to having their hand held, so you, as a leader, you have to try and figure that out. Him being from Mirror Universe, he has one way of doing things, and that's kind of just the way it's going to be.
Your question, Amy, I think is excellent, because there are many roads to Rome when it comes to leadership. And it all depends, there's a term called situational leadership, where people have their own styles. You have a style of teaching, right? Patrick has a style of leading his people and the jobs that they're working on. I have my own style, but sometimes we have to step out of our comfort zone and lead through different measures depending on the situation. So, if you take a piece of history, which is what I always like to go back to, and you look at General Eisenhower versus General Patton, or General Patton versus General Bradley, two diametrically different approaches to things. But you could argue that Patton, in the battle, was the most successful general in history, and his men hated him. Okay. What they loved was winning. Okay. They did more as an army. The Third Army did more in history. It traveled more miles, conquered more opposition, and just laid waste, right, on its way to Berlin, where other armies didn't move at half the speed because he could get everything out of his men. And so when you look at this situation, it's mixed. When you're running drills and you want people to be proficient, you can't let them get complacent, because we are talking about really, this is life and death. You have to move faster. And I think people recognize that. I also think that when you do achieve that objective, if you're trying to get your speed to a certain point and you hit it, you take, time to recognize, because you're right. Recognition does go a long way as well. But there have been people that I have worked for, either in the civilian world or the military world, that I didn't like very much, but I respected the hell out of them. They knew what they were doing, right? And kicking our ass, excuse my language, 6 ways to Sunday sometimes. But at the end of it, we were, the best unit at the time, or we had the best results, or we hit our objective. So you could come back and go, yeah, that was pretty rough. And there's a great book called About Face by Colonel David Hackworth, and it talks about that. Talks about running things situationally, talks about getting rid of complacency. And it's really hard to kick people out of complacency by being nice. But once they reach that point where they're a real effective team and a real effective unit, it all kind of comes home and you can back off a little bit. So Lorca, definitely was of this mindset that we are going to train as hard as we possibly can. That old adage, the more thou sweat in training, the less thou bleed in combat. And that was his approach to things. We are just going to drive. We're going to drive and we're going to win at these things. And you really can't argue with the results. When the colony that had the dilithium crystals was being attacked, right or wrong, he pushed and he manipulated by playing, their sound, their screams for help, throughout the ship. It's like, guys, this is the real deal. And then when they got there, his tactics, he's like, why is he pulling him closer? Beautiful maneuvers, right? And they won. And that's the key. And then at the end of that episode, you could see that the crew was pretty proud of what they had accomplished. So, like I said, there's different roads to Rome based on the situation.
Yeah, I, again, have not served in combat, but I've got combat in school, if you will.
That can be combat. It can definitely be combat. Kids today.
But, oh my gosh, yeah. But, and when you were saying you need to know your audience, and I look at my students and, when they just decide to quit working with me and stop doing their homework, and I have to pull them out. And there have been times in my past where, you're still a brand new teacher and you don't know how to motivate the kids. And yeah, it's just this berating and why aren't you doing your homework and and all of this negativity. And now what I've learned at the end of my little beration, I guess, is I say, why am I talking to you? Because I love you and I want you to be successful. So I sort of get down on them. And then at the end, this is why I'm doing it. I need you to be successful. I love you. You need to do your work, and try and end on an up note where they know that you've got to do your best, at least in my class. That's my philosophy there. But it took me so many years to, understand when pushing too hard and when the students would, just shut down. And unfortunately, I have shut down many students. And, some of the brave ones will say, you keep talking to me and it doesn't help. And I'm like, well, start doing your work and then let's have a different discussion, but it definitely kudos to those students for coming and letting me know, my leadership style is not helping them. And I just wonder if anyone on Discovery would dare say that to Lorca.
No.
Not a chance. But it also depends on the person too. I've worked for guys that were overly nice, right? And then they might get so much out of the men, but then the men start taking, they start taking, give an inch, take a mile type thing. And then they try and come down really hard and the guys just shut down.
I don't buy it.
Because this isn't who you are. You're not the come down on people person. So that plays into it too, is it has to be within your own character in order to go over well, not just be what's good for that. It's hard. Leadership is not easy because you have to figure out what motivates the person you're trying to motivate and what's within you to also get them to be motivated. So it's a lot. It's a lot. Either way, I think all of it plays well into Lorca. That he's very hard. I don't see him being I just don't see him being someone to put his arm around somebody and say, "Oh, come on, I know what you did wrong here. Let's go work on it." It's just not in his character and his nature to be that way.
Well, and I sort of think Stamets did a good job in standing up to him and saying, "You want us to keep making these jumps, and we're not ready." And then Lorca does this just switch, I think, again, because he knows his audience. And that's sort of, I think, the only time I can think of him doing this, and goes into this whole scientific discovery and this is what we're here to do. And yes, we're in war, but we need your science. And, and I think he sort of turned Stamets a little bit more in his direction because he was coming from that direction instead of we're going to win the war. Because Stamets didn't care about the war. He wanted to do the science, Yeah,
there was a bigger picture out there. Yeah.
He does that to Stamets twice because he gets him to do that one last jump that lands them in the mirror universe too, by kind of playing to Stamets, I just need you to do this one more, just for me, just one more for the crew. Get us all home, which is not very Lorca-like, but it is playing to what Stamets will respond to. Well, so we do see that twice with him doing it to Stamets.
Well, he was very manipulative. Actually, what he was saying to Stamets is, "Don't do it. We'll just go warp." Oh no, Captain. He had him so right. Stamets wanted to do it for him versus Lorca asking. So it was a beautiful, I thought, switch in the whole game, and that's what Lorca was great at was manipulation. He had it down. He knew the right triggers and the right buttons to push based on the crewman, and I think that's pretty solid.
So I want to ask you, talking about this whole manipulation. So I'm in a unit that I'm teaching my kids. It's called game theory, and so we talk about, is manipulation a good thing or a bad thing? So I'm going to ask you guys, and then I'll give my opinion. Is manipulating someone good or bad? How do you feel?
I always get in trouble for this answer. I don't think manipulating it's in and of itself is morally right or wrong. It's for what purpose that decides whether it's right or wrong. I get some people would argue that no, it's always wrong because you're changing the way someone thinks. But if I'm manipulating you to do something that's better for you, then that would be good for you. But if I'm doing it solely for gain, then it's wrong. In game theory, it's solely for gain, so it would be morally wrong in my opinion. But
okay, Ken.
I would say Patrick's, that I'm aligned with where he's going. There's manipulation for self-gain, and what I mean by that is the person who's doing the manipulating is doing it just for that, in Lorca's case, he was manipulating for him, right? He wasn't manipulating for the betterment of the team or the crew. And sometimes you have to be indirect in how to get people to follow a certain course, right? And I guess that's a form of manipulation. But the intent is positive, not negative, right? It's to kind of show them, because you're playing a little bit of mind games to get them thinking differently. So it can actually be a beneficial thing. So, what you're talking, you asked a boil the ocean question, I think. And it's very, very tough to answer because there's so many different circumstances where I think too, I've been manipulated a certain way, but it was for good intent and it got me in the right direction. And that's okay. There's been times where we've all been manipulated because somebody else wanted something and you're sitting there going, damn, I got taken for a ride. And we don't like that either. So that's why I say, it's just like leadership. It's situational. But I would say, getting into the habit and being good at manipulating is probably not overall a very good thing.
Huh. Okay. All right. I come from again, with game theory, like you want to win and you want to win in life. And so you want to always come out on top. And that's where you can be successful in achieving your goals and accomplishing and, furthering your life. So I sort of come at it in that respect that it's like, yeah, if you want to be successful, you've got to win. And it takes other people, to come along with you and bring you with you, because you're not going to do it by yourself. I don't think anyone has successes without other people. So I tend to believe that manipulation isn't a bad thing because it gets you where you need to go. And I think that's the most important. I think it has a very negative connotation, which I think is unfortunate because everyone in one way or another manipulates because you want to get what you want.
Yeah, you're trying to achieve an end goal. I do get what you're saying. I think there's a fine line between manipulation and education, and sometimes you need to manipulate to educate. It's all in what the intent is. And because so many people manipulate to achieve a negative end, right? And it's very common for that. That's where you got to be careful. And that's why I'm saying if you're really good at manipulating all the time, you could kind of get lost in it sometimes. And then it's like, are you being straight with me? All right.
Yeah. And I can see people, getting caught up in manipulating for manipulation self. Like they feel that that's where the power is in the controlling others. And it's like, no, that's not. Yeah, that shouldn't be your end result is getting power over others. It's, getting an end result of, furthering yourself and than your objectives.
Well, furthering the person, right? So it's the other person on the other,
Right.
on the other line. When you say yourself, I just want to make sure it's I'm manipulating so I can win, but the poor schlep I'm manipulating goes nowhere, and we don't want that, right? We want to make sure the lens is right. That's all.
No, and also it's the other part of it too is, are you really manipulating so that you go farther, or are you just manipulating so that the other person doesn't go as far? Because there's a difference in that too. If we're both going to get to a finish line at some point, is what I'm doing helping me get there faster, or is it just keeping pace and slowing you down is different? Those are two different scenarios of manipulation as well. You know, so if it's I'm not really hurting you, but I'm moving along at a faster pace, that's a better outcome. But if it's just to slow you down and you only get halfway through, then that's really, I'm just looking to hurt you. I didn't really do anything that helps me at all.
Mm-hmm. And that's what Lorca did to the Admiral, really. I mean, he manipulated her terribly at different places and phases, and, you know, even manipulated to get his own way. It just, that's why I say, in the context of Lorca, his manipulation, I thought, was always more on getting what he wanted to do, which was get to the middle, the mirror universe. I didn't think there was a lot of manipulation of the crew to make them better at war fighting. I thought he was very direct. He wasn't manipulating much at all. He was just, you're going to do this, you're going to go faster. You know, we have a colony to save. Is that manipulation? I don't know. You know, that's a fine line to me. That is more like, my belief is our number one mission is to get there and save those people. And so did he use a tactic, or did he manipulate to get everybody going in the same direction? I'm not really sure, but that's how I would surmise Lorca. He manipulated for all the wrong reasons, in my opinion, during the show. Now, a lot of us were unaware that he was manipulating for a long time during the show too. And I am still very, very upset that he was a mirror universe character. That really bothered me, and I'm really upset that he won't be back, because I really liked him. So
just to add to something you just said, when it first happened that he was mirror universe, it bothered me, and then it didn't bother me so much. I enjoyed it. I just didn't like the way whatever. I didn't like the way they showed that he was. The final reveal was cheesy to me, but I am very upset that he's gone. Like, I would have liked for his mirror universe self to come back and see how that plays out moving forward, maybe knowing that he can't ever go back to mirror universe or something. I always wanted to see a story like that we never get, but we won't this time, so I guess we can get it through Georgiou, but I don't know, it's a little different for me. And but you touched on Cornwell, right? So what did you think of his relationship with her, since you brought up the manipulation that he used on her?
Well, obviously they had in the real timeline with the real Lorca, there was something pretty special and unique there. And then in this one, he took full advantage of it and took full advantage of her. And, you know, and her anger at the end really demonstrated that. And it is funny going back and watching the series, knowing what you know, right? As you're walking through the journey, and people are asking you all the time, on your podcast, on The Edge or whatever, hey, you know, is he mirror? Is he not? And, you know, if you were asking me like, oh God, I hope not, because I really like this captain and whatnot. But when you get to the final and you realize he is, you go back and watch it. Boy, there were a lot of hints there. And in the scene when, Admiral Cornwell, you know, pokes him awake, or she's looking at all his scars, and he grabs her by the throat with the phaser and all of that. In that discussion point, you know, she says, I don't even know who you are anymore, essentially. And, you know, and even makes reference to the fact that, you know, when they were intimate, that he was very different, you know, all of that. So you started to kind of unwind it, but no, there was nothing good there. And then, of course, you know, he essentially sent her off to get killed. I mean, he was hoping she would die. So I would say that, you know, there was nothing really good about that relationship from Cornwell's perspective. And she was taking his command away from him. So, you know, you touch my command, I'm going to kill you. And that practically happened. So I can't say that was very good at all. That's when I started to kind of relook at this guy and go, wow, he'll do anything for this seat of power. Still didn't think he was connected to the mirror universe, thought he was just mucked up in the head. But wow, that was a pretty pivotal moment in the show and the series.
Amy?
Yeah, like when you say it's interesting to watch it now that you know what's happening, like I still wonder, how did Lorca know that they had a past relationship? Like, so when I watch it and I'm like, man, he's making these advances with, Admiral Cornwell, like, let's discuss this more and, take off your comm badge. Like, who would do that to an admiral? And so it's like, how did he have that, knowledge of what, Prime Universe Lorca did? That's the one question that I have. Like, how would he know to, go down that road with the admiral?
Okay, so in my head, the way I see that is, the only way to answer that is that when he was the only one to escape, she must have come to him when he was found or picked back up. And there must have been an interaction between them that told him to pursue that. So, and he had to have played stupid, that he didn't know what was going on or something along those lines, because you're right. There's no other way for him to figure out that they had a relationship other than when he was picked up, someone explained it to him. She came and he couldn't understand why an admiral was there. And she said, don't you remember? We were together. We had a relationship. Something along those lines had to have happened before all this to give him a clue to get into that. Or, I don't know, captain's logs laying around that he read. Something along those lines had to give it away, because otherwise, no, he wouldn't just start hitting on an admiral. Although that is kind of what you do in the mirror universe, right? So could he have just gotten lucky and taken a shot at the first admiral that came by and it was her, and he just happened to have a relationship with her? I mean, it seems ridiculous, but plausible, right?
Yeah.
Well, in the mirror universe, there seem to be the same characters around, right? His security chief were the same in both universes and whatnot. So there's nothing to say that he didn't have a relationship with, Mirror Cornwell on the other side. And could utilize that on this side. So they obviously knew each other. They had to have, right? In the mirror universe, they had to have. And then, obviously he gets picked up, whatever, he'd know who she is. And I'm sure there's data records that show that they might have served in the past and different things. And, he always has that excuse of being a bit battle rattled for memory failure or not quite being who he is. And she being a psychologist, right? Wasn't she a psychologist or a psychiatrist?
Yeah.
Well, she definitely understood that, he had issues, and I think was giving him a little bit of breathing room there, and taking a huge risk in putting him in command in the first place. So, yeah, I think all of that kind of came together, Amy, to answer your question, and I think that's how he was able to do it. I found that to be pretty plausible, to be honest with you, and the bits and pieces, because, sometimes we've been in relationships, I'm guessing, maybe not, but, where people have changed, or you meet people over time and you have a different view. And, time's a funny thing when you catch up. And it doesn't sound like their relationship was, obviously she got promoted, she got moved up. Kind of an issue there, by the way, but fraternization and all of that. But
right,
that's another issue. But in my head, just like Patrick was saying in his head, in my head, it was like that they were very intimate at one point and now had a professional relationship, and they were still friends. But that piece of the relationship goes way, way back. Just a guess.
Yeah, and I don't know. See, now when he grabbed the phaser and rolled over on her, that was when it hit in my head, he must be Mirror Universe. Because there's no reason to have a phaser under your pillow on a starship.
But you're at war. I sort of was like, I was still going along. Oh, this is what you do. You're at war, Yeah,
who's boarding you? That's my problem. Who's boarding you that you can't get to a weapon? Whereas in the Mirror Universe, you could be killed by your second in command to take over. So everyone slept with guns, I assume. Yeah. Under their pillow if they were in command.
I think your point is well taken. But like Amy, at that point still, no, I could have been that river in Egypt, right? I was like, no, he's not going that direction. But I took it from more from, there was a lot of the torture that took place under the Klingons that we didn't see. And that's what I attributed all the damage to his back and all that other stuff. And then just in his mind, it developed this paranoia. And that's why he did it. Patrick, you're absolutely right. In that universe, you live like that every day. In this universe, it didn't make much sense, but I was just attributing it to his torture and the results and the ramifications from that. That's how I was justifying it.
Yeah, I guess I could see it either way. I mean, the fact that we're so involved in it, I was thinking people were already talking mirror universe to start, right? So, so it definitely guided me towards saying, "Oh, look, he had a gun. It must be mirror universe." I don't know if I make that same connection if I'm not paying so much attention to all the talk online and everything else.
Sure.
But I ended up making that, and it ended up being true. And I mean, that was one of the problems I had is I stayed so involved with so much of the show that a lot of the twists, and not cheesy twists, but a lot of the things that they revealed just weren't that revealing to me. And this was one of them. Him being mirror universe was one of them because so many people talked about it for so long that it just made sense when it happened. We had that break between that episode and when we revealed we were in that he jumped us, the last jump to the mirror universe. Mm-hmm. That's all anyone talked about was, is it the mirror universe or is it? And then they came up with 900 other explanations that were so far out there that mirror universe is the only one that made sense by the time we got to the episode. But anyway, that's a whole other episode. So
I just had an awful thought, but that guy was jumping everything.
Pretty much. So on to a relationship that wasn't like that. What did you think of his relationship with Burnham?
Well, you say it wasn't like that, but I sort of feared that it was in Mirror. And we'll talk about that because I wanted to.
Okay. So yes, you're right. So our version seems that it was he obviously manipulated that scenario, right, to get her on the bridge, and then he used the power that they'd given him for controlling this ship, where he can make any decision he wanted, and he decided to reinstate her. And did he pick her because of their relationship in Mirror Universe? Did he pick her because of her reputation in this universe? Like, at first I thought he just wanted someone with what's the best way to put it? Someone with an attitude like his, and he saw her as having the same kind of attitude as hers. I'm going to do whatever it takes to win this war. The Vulcan hello and all that. But as it moved on, did he pick her because of who she is to him in his universe?
Absolutely. And I think that was made clear.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree. But it just posing the question, because I don't know if this is actually something I didn't hear talked about a lot, which is interesting because we talked about everything else a lot about this show. Mm-hmm. So what do you think, Ken?
Well, after watching it the second time through, knowing the answer, you can see that he's obsessed. He's absolutely obsessed with her. So it was more having her around, plus her knowledge and her abilities certainly helped the situation. But no, that was a pretty freaky, creepy obsession that he had with Burnham. And even its origins just sounded like, it was ick with a capital I.
Yeah. And you could see it, I think, distinctly, well, at least for me, two incidences, even before we knew he was Mirror or anything, but when, Landry. Yeah. And so they were in, and she was evaluating Kitty, and Landry's like, no, if you're doing this, you're doing it because Lorca wants you to be doing it. And I'm just here to make sure that you don't get, derailed. And she just made that comment that it's like, you're here because Lorca wants you here. And that sort of was an indicator. And then secondly, when they are taking, when Tyler and they're going down to Pavo, and Lorca says, bring her back in one piece. And he's like, oh, don't worry, I will the ship. And he's like, no, Burnham, And so it was like, what is this extra attention that Lorca is always having with Burnham? And it is that obsessiveness that comes from what he had in the relationship in the Mirror. Yeah. And I think those 2 points really pointed it out quite early on that there was something fishy going on with that relationship.
Yeah, because he didn't even want her going on the Klingon ship at all, right? That became an argument. So you're right. And that's why I said, he was completely obsessed. It was odd.
Yeah, it was a little interesting. But yeah, like you said, watching it back the second time, you really see all the clues. The first time, it was kind of confusing. Mm-hmm. I agree. It was just, why is he so different with her? And And like I said, the first time I saw it, I thought, it's because he thinks she has the same kind of, I'm just going to shoot first, ask questions later attitude. And that's what he thinks is going to win a war. But then once it's all revealed, you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So when that last episode dropped, or was it the second to last? I can't remember precisely. And they used the word when Giorgio was telling Burnham how their relationship was, Burnham and Lorca's, she used the word groomed. How do you guys feel about that wording and the relationship that they had on the Mirror Universe?
I took it as, rightly or wrongly, that it might have started off as a mentor and friend, but then it evolved. So it became first a daddy and then almost a husband type. It really crossed those lines. And while it wasn't definitive, there was a part of Lorca that, one, he was obsessed with her for different reasons. But I think beyond what we would consider in our universe to be normal, something's crossed there. And, it's kind of an odd, it was an odd plot twist. I thought the whole point of it, mm-hmm. And bring me on when you want to talk about Giorgio, because I'm going to be like the opposite of what you guys think about her too. So,
okay,
perfect.
Patrick, what did you think about that word groomed?
No, I'm kind of in the same boat there. It started out as like a training that turned into an obsession, and it's just creepy. The whole situation is kind of creepy, but it makes sense in the Mirror Universe. Those kind of things wouldn't be considered wrong there, right? I mean, they don't think the way we do. That's the point of the Mirror Universe. The Mirror Universe is to show us what could be if we took basically all the wrong decisions to get to where we are now.
Yeah, when I heard that word, that was a trigger to me, and it really sent me in a wrong direction. I don't know, maybe that's what the writers intended it, but when every year we have to go through inappropriate conduct with students training at my district, and I'm sure it's across the nation, because you have some teachers who get in inappropriate relationships with their students, and it does become sexual, and you've got 20 gazillion stories, unfortunately. And part of that is because, as a teacher, you're in this position of power over a student. So you have that contributing, you've got age contributing. And so they go through, and grooming is one of the stages that a pedophile or someone who's going to take advantage of a youth is going to go through. And so when I heard that word, because I have been trained so much in these stages of trying to get students in a relationship, like, it just was such a trigger. I was like, oh my gosh, it was a slap in the face. And it took me down this road that I didn't want to go with Lorca and Burnham. And I did not appreciate it at all. And I didn't like that aspect of it. But, is that what it is in the Mirror Universe? I don't know. Does it make it okay because it's Mirror Universe? I don't know. Is that what the writers intended, to have that trigger word as one of those stages in, getting these inappropriate relationships? I don't know. But it's still difficult for me to talk about.
So I didn't think of it that way until we started talking about it now, but I think now talking about it, yes, I think it was intentional. I think now, again, you said, is it okay because it's in the Mirror Universe? And I think the answer is yes, because the Mirror Universe is supposed to be wrong. If that makes sense. So we're supposed to react with a visceral hatred of that concept. That's the point of the Mirror Universe, is to look at it and go, wow, that could be us, but it's not. So thank God it's not us. But so I think maybe it was intentional that they use the word groom, and that's one of the steps, because now that you bring it up, it's a totally different show. I think I was watching what was I watching? I was watching something else. Oh, Cold Case. There was an episode about a teacher who was murdered, who was getting into inappropriate relationships with his students. They were adults. It was a college professor, but still, the whole point was like one of the students who did it was like, I didn't realize until I was a teacher just how much he manipulated me into it, and how much she used the same word, groomed me for it. And I didn't think of it till now, when you brought it up, because in my industry we go through training, but we don't hear those kind of. It's not the same, for inappropriate relationships. We don't do like a top to bottom. It's just, general sexual harassment kind of training. But they use the same terminology, grooming someone, and that because you're a teacher, even though it's adult to adult, you still stand in a position of power over that other adult. So you're using that influence to get what you want out of them. And I think that is the intention of the scene. I think that is the intention of the word now, because it is kind of how it would work. We saw that with other people and Georgiou in the mirror universe, right? That other people were her lovers because she was just the emperor. And she used that power to get what she wanted. So I think, yes, they did that intentionally. And they wanted you to have the reaction you're having now. I think that was intentional.
Well, maybe. I do think, though, that if he groomed or maneuvered or whatever, whether it was intentional or not, he definitely fell in love with her. I mean, he was lost in her. So I think there had to be all the things that you said. A lot of times when I hear these things going on, it is from a position of power, and it's to use and manipulate. And I think that's where the line kind of gets drawn. I think he really, truly loved her and couldn't wait to have her back, and wanted, even if it was the mirror version from his point of view, he wanted her with him. Nobody else. And so it is, that's why I say not only was it creepy in its origins, it really developed into something that, actually became his downfall, was his obsession with her. His caring and his love for her went beyond, the stuff that you're talking about, Amy. Hey, way to keep it light, kid. First of all, thanks for that. But a lot of times that's I'm guessing that those folks are using the younger people and all of that, and manipulating. We had the whole case up in New Hampshire years ago. It was awful. Where the teacher actually used the students and to kill her husband. Crazy stuff like that, right? And she wanted nothing to do with the students. But she really wanted to get rid of him, and that, very Lorca-like in that situation. However, that doesn't seem to be Lorca's intent, was not to just to be able to say, I've won, I've conquered, I own this. He's genuinely loved her deeply.
So this was Lorca's love story arc with Burnham and his mirror universe idea of what love is.
Yes, their twisted version of
obsessive.
It. Yes, their distorted version of it. yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think
that makes sense. And also, we don't get to see what mirror Burnham was doing. She could have been using him to get a ship. She could have been manipulating him, which is probably more forgivable because she's the lower on the chain, right? But we don't know, because we never really see her side of the relationship. We just hear it from Georgiou and see our Burnham.
Interesting you say lower on the chain. So essentially she was Georgiou's adopted daughter or whatever. So she was pretty high. So it could have been his way of getting close to the emperor. But
that's true too.
But in a Shakespearean way, fell in love with her along the way, right? So it's like, and this is where it really gets interesting. That could be a good book on itself, I think, is how that whole thing developed.
Oh, you just stopped.
Yeah, I think the three of us should write it. So after
this podcast, someone needs to get to write it.
Yeah. Let's see if we can get a dictaphone type thing going here, and we'll just go.
No, there's so many ways this could have gone. That this should be a story in and of itself somewhere.
And now we're not going to know any of it because now Lorca is dead.
We'll get David Ward on the phone and we'll get him to pump that out.
Well, maybe, but if you flip it though, I was very upset. I have to say that the writers or whatever took this course. I just want to start not necessarily the love course or whatever, but the course that they took with Lorca, because one of my fears is that when you have somebody who leads and drives the way he does, let's take all the relationships out of it. People will look at that kind of like what you were saying earlier, Amy. Where's the positive reinforcement? Where's the conference room with the tea? Where's all this stuff that we're so used to in Star Trek? Where's the symphony music? This guy's definitely listening to Led Zeppelin when there's nobody around, right? So it's one of those things where I think it's okay to have, when you talk about IDIC and infinite diversity, everybody that is focused on more of a military aspect than an explorer expert does not make them evil, and it shouldn't. But two, in Star Trek, it seems to, right? Because never forget one important fact in Star Trek, TNG fans. Captain Maxwell was right.
Oh, man, we're going to hear it on Babel for that one.
Oh.
He was right. His method,
Captain Jellicoe.
Yeah, different, but Maxwell's methods were wrong, but he was right.
Yes. He was right. Agreed.
Wow. I got the Queen to agree with me. I'm done. That's it.
it.
Drops the
Wrap
mic,
it up.
walks out of the room.
That's it. That's a wrap.
So, well, what are your thoughts on that, Patrick, right? I mean, so when you look at all the captains in Star Trek, right, whether it's Captain Tracy, he goes nuts. In the original series, you have Jellicoe, he's a hard ass, but obviously he was successful in his mission and he was not wrong. You have Maxwell, who wasn't really an authoritarian, but he was like, we got to get ready for war because these guys are doing bad things. You don't see, I think Sisko's probably the closest one to more of a warrior than a diplomat, although he was a pretty good diplomat. And that's why I say what I say. I think you can have a balance. He didn't have to be mirror universe in order to be an effective warrior in the 24th century, is my opinion. What are your thoughts?
Well, that's what I was going to say. You actually hit it right on the head, that Sisko is the perfect captain for the scenario, in my opinion. And I'm trying to think of when Sisko became a captain, if he was a captain when the war started or afterwards. But
just before.
It's irrelevant.
Yeah, just before it.
Right. So it's really irrelevant because even as commander, he was acting captain, right? So, but he's the perfect template for this because he knew when to push and when not to push, which is part of what generals and captains should be able to figure out, the right times to push. It's like anyone who's ever played the game Risk. You know when to go into, Eastern Europe and when not to, because if you go in too soon, they wipe you out. And it seems that for all that Lorca did, he actually would have been the guy that ran in too soon. Some of these things shouldn't have worked, even though his weapon was so good. And it's just kind of fortunate that he didn't get the spore drive lost in the process, because he was pushing so hard to close these gaps in his research that all it would have taken was one lucky shot and they would have lost the ship.
Yeah, well, I think what you're saying, Ken, going back, is it would have been nice if he wasn't Mirror, because then we could have seen this vastly different captain that we haven't really seen at length. Yeah, you have your little Ben Maxwell's, and I guess, maybe Sisko's, we do get to see his arc and his command style be the most different, I guess you will, than the, your Janeway, Picard type of captains. But here's this Lorca that is so standout different. And then we just have to wash it under the rug and say, oh, well, that's because he's Mirror. Why can't we have this dynamic, effective, pushing captain who has an objective and wants to do it? Why can't we have that in the Prime universe? And why haven't we seen it before? That's, I think, a great question. And I hope that we get to see that I don't know. How are they going to portray Captain Pike?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think it all comes to balance, right? So, we've talked about how family is my personal favorite TNG episode, because Picard was dealing with it realistically and he was hurt and all these other things. And that's where I was looking to see if they were going to do this not just for an episode, but with a captain who had battle scars, who was trying to figure things out. And that, to me, would have been a lot more interesting. Plus, they just had a great actor and a great character to really take long term. Now, when I look back at it, and if I was in a writer's room at the very beginning, I think this twist was brilliant in its concept. You know, you just can't keep anything secret nowadays, right? But where I was really going, though, is you need that balance. There are people in the military that are very cautious, making sure they're very circumspect and getting a lot of collaboration and all that other stuff. And you need those folks. And then you have other folks that are more like, we're going to jump in where angels fear to tread. And you have that balance where sometimes the people that are a little bit more cautious or whatever, they need to be pushed. And you have those who are a little bit more aggressive that need to be restrained. And when you put that whole mosaic together, you have the right combination of what it takes to keep the service functional and people safe. And I think you need that in a federation as well. And it's not, if the writers had set it up differently without hostiles all over the place, well, then you don't. But that's not how they scripted it, right? And so if you just want everybody happy-go-lucky and peace-loving, as we're all peace-loving, nobody hates war more than the soldier. That's the old saying. Then you need to have those dynamics in play. And I think that's where Star Trek misses it a lot, right? And it's kind of funny because in a sense they also recognize it because in almost every case they're just about to lose. In almost every case. So it's like, you've set it up to fail in many ways, right? Except for in Sisko's world. But in all the others, they were set up to fail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would have been nice to see Giorgio and Lorca at the same time, each on their perspective ships. Because as you're saying, you want someone to tread lightly and, think about and, contemplate. And then you need those that jump. It's like those two captains, I think Giorgio and Lorca fit the bill exactly.
They do. It's the Kirk-Picard dynamic. And you would have seen the two of them side by side in that scenario.
Yeah.
Yep, you're absolutely right. That would have been a lot of fun to see. I agree.
Ken, do you have any final thoughts on Lorca as a character?
First of all, thank you for having me on the edge. I really enjoyed this conversation. It was really deep. It was a lot of fun. And I'm going to really enjoy listening back to this and listening to you guys as we had this conversation, because I thought there was some really, really strong points that were brought up. But I'll just say this. I thought he was a brilliant character. I'm really going to miss him. And I hope that it's going to be very difficult for them to come up with a captain. I think because it's such a premier character in Star Trek, even if it isn't quote unquote the main character in Discovery, obviously the captain of the ship, she or he, yields a lot of influence and power over things. So I hope the Discovery writers are up to the task. But the Jason Isaacs, brilliant portrayal. Wish you could have hung around the show. Hope somehow, some way they could work you back in. And hopefully, you still have some of those same characteristics that would make it interesting. So that's my final thought.
Amy, any final thoughts for you?
Yeah, I agree with Ken. Jason Isaacs did an amazing job, just so dynamic on screen. And I just, he was someone that you just love to hate. And I was going through every episode. Oh, I can't stand him. Oh, I love him. And, just this roller coaster ride of emotions that I had with Lorca. I mean, it was so wonderful to see that and to have this emotional response from this one character that his was by far got the most emotion out of me, that it was like, oh, I can't stand he's so mean to him. Oh, I love him. He's doing everything right, and I wish, that Burnham would have brought Lorca back instead of Giorgio, but that didn't happen. I do hope that we get to see Prime Lorca, and maybe he will have some similar characteristics, because I think you see that through the mirror, that there is something universal in the character. But I think the writers did a great job with him. And whether he's mirror or not, I think his character was helped to define the first season of Discovery. So well done. Well done, writers. Well done.
Yeah, so my only final thoughts are that I really did enjoy the character. He's up there in my list of a favorite character. He's not my favorite. I said that last week. It actually was Tyler Volk was my favorite character. But my only difference from you, Amy, is that I don't want to see him come back. And actually also same for Ken. Both of you want to see him come back somehow. I don't. Now that he's dead, I want him dead. And I don't want to see, if they bring back a Prime version, I don't want to see a typical Federation captain. I don't want that idea. I want my last memory of him to be who he was in his final moments, when he gets stabbed in the back and pushed off through the sun star thing. And I want that to be it. I don't want this ruined, because I think he played such a perfect mirror universe character in the Prime universe trying to hide, that bringing a Prime version, if he comes back and he's just another Starfleet captain with a little bit of edge on him, I think it'll ruin it for me personally.
All right.
So, Ken, when you're not hanging out here with us, where can people find you around the internet?
Got a little show called Standard Orbit with a couple of fine young folks with me, Haley Stoddard and Zach Moore. We drop our shows every Monday, and I hope you all listen as much as you can. It's been a lot of fun, and it's taken some new changes here that I think also will add some firepower as we try to keep it interesting year in, year out. It's not easy. I can be found on the Babel Conference. I'm always there poking around, taking some shots and having some fun with that Earl Grey team and your team and Warp 5. So I'm always on the Babel Conference having fun. And you can find me on Twitter at BostonSCPO.
It's been fun talking about inappropriate relations from a mirror universe today, but this isn't the only thing we've been discussing on the network. So here's a quick look at some of the other things you have missed elsewhere on Trek FM.
Previously on Trek.fm. To the journey!
You really did reorient my thinking about the mess hall. Now I need to rewatch every scene with the mess hall and try to visualize Neelix's kitchen as the captain's dining room. I just assumed that when she said, this used to be my private dining room, that she meant the whole mess hall, like the entire room that they're in.
That would be gigantic.
How have I watched Voyager for what is now 23 years and not realized this?
Warp 5.
Gerard, why are you laughing at Gerard?
Just it sounds like, an obnoxious nickname for like a rap star or something. I don't.
See, I'm picturing he's like on Kronos, he's like the representative for Targ Subway.
You see, that's where I would have went with it. Not obnoxious rapper, but guy who lost lots of weight.
Literary Treks.
To me, and I kind of thought this more as we got further into the book, it really felt like a narrative computer game almost, where you find all these clues and you visit these rooms and then you have to visit the rooms again and all that. And we'll get into the main plot of what they do later in the book. But yeah, this setup, I love the mystery. I'm really enjoying like what's going on, what happened here.
Earl Grey.
Disagree that Nemesis is the worst of the TNG movies. I would put Insurrection and Generations at the bottom, way before Nemesis. Like, there's times when I actually prefer Nemesis over First Contact. You can send me the hate mail later. I love...
Stunned silence follows.
I love Nemesis. I think there is so much good in it. There's so many good themes, and the action and the philosophy and the characters, and I really do love everything about Nemesis just as much as I love everything about First Contact.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out all these shows and join the conversation about your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You'll find us wherever you get your podcast. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcast on iPhone, iPad, or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they are published. And please leave us a star rating and written review. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from your website or grab the RSS link.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place to join in the larger conversation is the Babel Conference. That's our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, Babel, into the search field on Facebook, and it will come right up. Now, if you'd like to send us an email, we love your emails. You can use our form at website on trek.fm/contact. Choose to send to a show and select The Edge. That will come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. So, Patrick, where can people find you on the interwebs when you're not having inappropriate relationships?
Well, oh boy, they can find me on in the Babel Conference. I pop up in there every so often, and they can find me at Twitter at MagicDrop5. It's one word. The 5 is a number, and it can be found on this tiny little ship called the Enterprise on Warp 5. So when you're Amy, when you're not shooting your eyes with some stuff to make it so you can see in the sun, where can people find you?
Well, you can find me on the network here on Earl Grey, where that's our podcast about the next generation. And I do that with Richard Marquez and Justin Ozer. You can also find me on Twitter at Miss Amy Nelson. But my favorite place is the Babel Conference.
If you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, you can become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and more. Available through our special patrons website, Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of money to produce, host, and distribute these shows each month. We really appreciate any support you can give us and hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM.
We'd like to take this time to give a special shout out to our associate producers. They are Norman Lau, Tony Robinson, Thomas Puleo, Lisa Slack, Shoab Mirza, Richard Rutledge, James Muldrow, Cornelia Reutner. Thank you so much for supporting Trek FM and especially The Edge.
Join us next time to see what's happening on the edge of Federation space.
The security officer, gosh. And they were in seeing, oh my gosh, I'm losing all of my
Landry?
Purdy Kitty, or what did they call him?
Oh yeah. The
and the security chief.
Yeah, wasn't her name Landry?